you obviously study a lot about the Bible. Yet, and I researched you and I wanted to figure out what you believe. And I couldn't find it. I found that a question that you despise is, do you believe in God?
Mm-hmm. See, the thing about God is that God isn't something you believe in. Or you could say that the way we conceptualize belief in the modern world is shallow. To believe in God is to commit your life. That's what the belief is. It isn't the statement, I believe in God. The statement can get in the way. It does all the time. It says in the Gospels, Christ himself says, not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Just because you say you believe something, it's like people say all the time that they're Christians. I'm a believing Christian. It's like, that's hard there, buddy. That's the most difficult possible commitment by definition. It's because it's the hoisting of the cross, right? Really, you're going to commit to that, are you? So here's what you're committing to. Painful, unjust death, accompanied by betrayal, the perfidy of the mob, and the dominion of the tyrant. And you're going to welcome that. And that's not all, because Christ harrows hell. That's not all. That's just where it starts. Full confrontation with malevolence. You're going to commit to that, are you? Because that's what you're doing.
What do you mean you're going to commit to that? You mean you're going to commit to believe that
No, you're going to do it.
That you're going to do it.
In your own life. That's what Christ calls upon people to do. That's the imitation of Christ that's at the core of a genuine Christian commitment. Now, people will say, you can't get to heaven by works alone, and that's true. That's not what I mean. That's not the point here. The point is that the belief is a commitment to a pattern. The pattern is full voluntary confrontation. Full naked, crucified voluntary confrontation. Accepted in good faith, with joy, and courageously. Bring it on. Military people understand this, or at least an aspect of it, right? Because they put their lives on the line, and not just their lives, their souls. And so it's a hell of a thing to ask of people. Christianity is not a comfort. Look, Christ says his burden is light. And what does that mean? It means that there's really nothing that can provide abundance and security like the truth. So that's the lightness part of it. But the cross part of it is you have to decide not to shrink away from anything. You don't get to live in a pumpkin shell anymore. That's the people. Christ comes back at the end of time, and he doesn't reserve his wrath for the sinners. He reserves his wrath for people who sit on the fence. And, people who want a normal, secure life. I'm not pillorying that. I'd rather have them than the radicals and the revolutionaries. But that's not what a human being is. Like we're bounders over the stormy ocean, We're built for a life of radical harness and adventure. We're built for the maximum sacrifice. That's what it means to believe, to accept that. No holds barred. Away the hell we go. And so people say they're believing Christians. It's like, really? Really? You dare say that? You have no idea what you're saying. Because it's a total commitment. It's a total commitment to confront and ride out the worst. Well, I'll give you an example. So in the story of Exodus, the Israelites are lost in the desert. They're lost for like 45 years. And they're always whining and bitching and complaining and acting like, privileged slaves and pining for the tyranny and hoping for the golden calf and complaining that the heavenly food they have to eat isn't good enough because there's not enough variety. And it's like they're really quite contemptible. And near the end of their voyage to the promised land, really on the border, they run out of water again. And they go to Moses. They get all bitchy about it. And they're faithless and complaining, and God gets sick of them again, and he sends a bunch of poisonous serpents in to bite them. And you might think, well, no good God would do that. It's like you're not paying attention to the story. What's the story? If you're lost and faithless and then you get whiny and resentful, it's just going to make it worse. And so you're in the desert and you don't have enough to drink, and there's all sorts of stupid things you can do that bring the snakes forward. And so that's what happens, is that it's already bad and they make it worse. So now there's all these poisonous snakes biting them. And they get tired of it eventually, and they go to Moses and they say, well, we know that you can talk to God, and so do you want to see if he'll call off the snakes? And Moses goes and has a chat with God, and God says basically that he's pretty sick and tired of the Israelites, and he thinks that some more snakes might be just the thing they need, but he decides that maybe he'll listen to Moses because Moses has, stored up a certain amount of goodwill. And so God says to Moses, cast a serpent in bronze and put it on a bronze pole and put it in the midst of the Israelites so they can all look on it. And if they look at it, then the poison won't affect them. He doesn't get rid of the snakes. He calls upon the Israelites to face what they're avoiding, to face what's poisoning them. And because of that, they become stronger. That's life, man. And so Christ says later, much later, that he has to be lifted up like the snake in the desert, which is a very strange thing for anyone to say. And the Israelites have to look on what they're terrified of in order to obtain resilience. That's the healing motif. That snake on the staff is the symbol of Asclepius. It's the symbol that physicians still use now to represent their healing enterprise. A little of what poisons you makes you stronger. That's the theory, right? And that's the theory of voluntary confrontation. Well, Christ, the crucifix is the same image except expanded. It's like all possible snakes. It's all the things that could happen to you if the worst possible things happen to you all at once. And the Christian calling is to welcome that. Right? To become the sort of person who could welcome that. Job, for example, in the story of Job is tortured by Satan himself. Job's a good man, and God's bragging about him in heaven, about how good he is, and Satan comes along and says, I don't think he's that good. And God says, what do you mean? And Satan says, he's just privileged. Things are going well for him, and so he's good. Let me at him for a while, and we'll see if he's good. And God says, I think he's good. Do your worst. And so Job is, all his enterprises collapse, his servants all die, his wealth is demolished, he ends up extremely ill with a disfiguring disease. He's sitting in the ashes, demolished. His wife tells him that all that's left for him is to shake his fist at God and die. And then his friends come and tell him that it's all his fault. And so that's Job. And what does Job do? Job says, these terrible things have happened to me, but that's not because of some central flaw in me. He maintains his faith in his integral humanity, and he refuses to lose faith in God. And it's kind of perverse in a way, because Job has every bloody reason to shake his fist at God and die, which is what his wife tells him to do. And Job's insistence is, no matter what happens to you, you're called upon to maintain faith and move forward. And that's expanded in the crucifixion story.
So with all your studies that you've done in the Bible, you've studied it for so long, do you believe in it?
Well, I believe in it in the way that we just described. Do I believe that the truth sets you free? Absolutely. It isn't that I believe it even. I know it's true. I know it's true, and I try to live in that knowledge. It's very difficult to only think or say things that are true, but you can practice it. Mm-hmm. And it's a great relief. As you pointed out, you don't have to keep track of anything. That's just that in and of itself is
it's freeing.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Freeing.
Do I believe that Christ is the way and the life, and that no one comes to the Father but through him? Sure. But I also know what that means. It means that, imagine that you want to have the Spirit of the Almighty dwell within you, say, in this Old Testament manner. How do you do that? By taking the burden of life on yourself voluntarily. Why? Because that causes the best within you to make itself manifest.